You're listening to Juicy Radio. I'm your host, Tony Bacigalupo, and in this episode, we'll be talking with Sam Rosen of Deskpass.com. He actually formerly was running a co working space in Chicago called The Coop. That's how I came to know Sam many years back now. And Sam's just been a terrific supporter of the global co working movement for so long. And now, with his new project, he's really making it his business to get to know co working spaces all over the place and what they need to become more successful. So Sam's got a lot of wisdom to share. He's a great guy, and he will be joining us at Juicy in New York, May 5th through 7th. So if you haven't gotten your tickets to that, now's your last chance, and I will be very excited to see you there if you are planning on going. So hope to see you at Juicy in New York, May 5th through 7th. But now it's time to talk to Sam. So without further ado, let's talk to Sam Rosen from Deskpass on this Juicy Radio episode 12. Sam, thanks so much for joining us here at Juicy Radio. I'm really excited to talk to you because you're working on a really cool project right now with Deskpass. So before we get to that, I would love for you to just tell the Juicy Radio listening audience a little bit about your story, how you got into co-working, and how you kind of ended up where you are today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Tony, and for all the people who are listening. Thanks for listening. So I can definitely share my co-working story, which actually started in New York. So it's kind of a full circle, beautiful thing that's happening. But I've run a digital agency here in Chicago, Illinois, for about 12 years called One Design. And I came across co-working probably when I was maybe 4 or 5 years into that business, and probably had like 5 or so employees, and had the sort of the beautiful opportunity because I was the boss. I could work from wherever I wanted. So at that time, I had a girlfriend who ended up moving over to New York, and I would travel to visit New York, probably every like 2 or 3 weeks, or she'd come to visit me. But most of the time, I was visiting her, and I would end up in her little garden apartment. And she was a beautiful, lovely human, but she was a messy, messy person. So her apartment was like I said, it was like in the basement level, and it had really crappy internet connection, had really crappy cell phone reception. So when she would go off to work, I would make that my office. And I remember particularly one day, we just got this new client. It was like a big important client for us, and I was leading a kickoff meeting, and I must have dropped the call 5 times during that meeting. And I remember afterwards, one of my colleagues, someone I worked with, going like, dude, not cool. You can't do this stuff anymore. And I was sort of at a loss because, I wasn't from New York, and I had my girlfriend and her friends, but I didn't have like a broader audience or group of people to hang out with, and I didn't have a community out there. So I started going across the street to this little hipster cafe, and it didn't take long for me to realize that they didn't really like me there. I would sit there all day, and I would have a coffee, maybe two, and a bagel. And the reason I could tell they didn't want me there was because just every time I went through, there was a new rule, and the rule would be like, no working on your laptop between their lunch rush, or all of a sudden the outlets would stop working, and I was like, okay, I get the message. You don't want my people here. So I think it was my next trip, or one of my next trips, I came across co-working. A colleague of mine mentioned, he said, Sam, have you ever heard of this? I had no idea what he was talking about. This is like 8 or so years ago. There really weren't very many co-working spaces around. And he showed me a wiki, and thankfully, because of New York, the metropolis it is, there happened to be a co-working space nearby called, it was called The Change You Want to See, which I thought was kind of a silly name. at the beginning of this adventure, but now I think it's a profound name because it really did change, like my whole experience and my life and kind of what I focus on. So I ended up going to this place. It was a few blocks from her house, and I remember walking in and feeling very awkward. And there's a big table full of people, and somebody saw that I opened the door and came to me and said, "Are you here for co-working?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Cool. Well, we just have like a couple rules. Be respectful. Don't download any porn or movies, and if you have a good experience at the end of the day, it's a non-for-profit space, so just drop off a donation in that box." And I was like, "Oh, okay, awesome." And instead of, one of the things that was kind of neat about it to me was I really went there for the physical space. Like I went there for a quiet, clean place to work, a little private area that I could talk on the phone when I needed to, and like internet that didn't suck. And I got all those things, which was super. But the thing that really kind of blew my mind was by the end of my experience, um, I made friends. Like that table was full of people in media and people in advertising and design and technology, and they were cool. And I made friends with the dude next to me. And by the end of it, I had like things to do and people to hang out with, and I felt a lot less alone when my girlfriend went to work. So I fell in love with co-working. I fell in love with that concept. I immediately looked to see if anybody was doing it in Chicago, and it seemed like a bunch of people were interested in it and wanted a space, but no one sort of, had taken the risk to just put a space together. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and had some extra space that I was living in that was right next to my office, and voila, my partner Pat Griffin and I decided to turn what was my apartment uh, into Chicago's first co-working space, which we called the Coop. Called it the Coop because it was in an old chicken processing plant. And we had, first movers advantage, and it was early, so we were able. I think we started with like to 10 desks, and we were able to fill them up pretty quickly, and met some really cool people. The woman who ran the space, I ended up marrying. So it's a co-working love story, and really fell in love with the concept. And a lot of it just kind of grew organically. We were able to bring some really neat people together, and before you knew it, we had more demand than space. And as we were looking to move our business, we decided to really take the plunge and go from 8 desks to about 6,000 square feet in the heart of downtown Chicago. So we built this community over time, and grew it a bunch of times over. And then in about 3 summers ago, we decided to sell it to Nextbase. So Nextbase was looking for their first space here in Chicago, and uh, I had become friends with those guys over a long period of time, and it was a nice fit. So a few summers ago, we ended up selling our co-working space to Nextbase. So now the Coop is Nextbase River North, and I'm sitting above it, a few floors up from it right now. So that's how I, ventured into co-working and opened up a co-working space. Um, but I think, for me, being a guy who builds software for a living and helps people solve their business problems, um, as soon as we started getting into this idea of shared work and co-working, we noticed that there were lots of opportunities for tools and technology and other ways to help facilitate and grow this emerging, industry. Um, so we started by building a directory. At this point, really the best place to find co-working spaces when we got started was the co-working wiki. And now there's quite an onslaught of different types of directories, both international and national and local. But we along with Loose Cubes, I think we're one of the first folks to build like a visual, nice directory of co-working spaces, which we still have today. And then in the process of operating our space and doing all the hospitality and operational stuff that it takes to manage a space like this, we started to build software, which we called Desk Time app, to help us manage the day-to-day of running a space. So billing and scheduling, and how do you grow and facilitate a community? How can we build a piece of software that helps that process? And we focused on that for quite a while, until very recently, when we sold that to our friends who run Cowork Buffalo in Buffalo, New York. And now, over the last couple of years, we've been really focused on this new business and tool that is working quite well, and we're really, really excited about. And we're actually sponsoring Juicy this year, to help kind of spread the word. And that is called Deskpass. And I know, Tony, that you know what Deskpass is, but basically what we've decided to do is, we're in Chicago and Los Angeles, and we're in Denver. And this month we'll be in Austin, Texas, and right ahead of Juicy, we'll launch ourselves in New York City. And basically what it is what we found was most of the co-working operators and spaces that we meet have the same problem and the same thing they want more than anything, which is, how do I find new people? How do I add more people to my community? How do I bring people in the front door? The landscape of marketing and selling a co-working space and getting people in the front door is, it's so very different from when I started nearly 8 years ago. There are a lot more spaces. There are really fabulous operators that are big and have a lot of money. And aside from marketing, period, they have a lot of money to do it, and they do it well. So you see a lot of folks and spaces, the spaces that I really am drawn to, and I really enjoy the smaller, sort of more independent spaces like your old space, Newark City, or the Coop, or there's still a ton of them in New York and Chicago and all these other cities. You find them, being a little more challenged to help bring new qualified folks in the front door. So what Deskpass is it's a membership that gives an end user, so somebody who is looking for space, access to, right now we have 85 spaces in those 3 cities. So you pay, it starts like $50 a month, and you can go and you can try all these spaces in all these cities, and you can either stay on our membership and use that to access those spaces, or what happens most of the time is someone checks out a space, let's say they're in New York and they're at Grind and they love Grind, they keep going to Grind. The way the platform is built is it really incentivizes them to end up getting a full-time membership at Grind. So we're just trying to build a great tool to help the vast majority of people out there that don't know that these spaces exist, help find them and educate them and get them in the front door of some awesome co-working spaces. So that's what we've been up to now.
Awesome. That is an amazing. Yeah, I mean, I knew that I knew you were going to have a long story to tell, and I figured I was just going to let you rip, and that was perfect. You definitely were able to compress this whole thing down in a great way.
I told that story.
Yeah. It's funny because as I'm listening to you describe different pieces of this, I'm wanting to now go back. It's like, now we've got Sam's whole story. Now I want to go back and pick at some little bits here and there.
Yeah,
so first of all, change you want to see in Williamsburg, really the East Coast birthplace of co-working, taking Noel Hidalgo, taking the movement from Brad Newberg and Tara Hunt and Chris Messina out in San Francisco and bringing it to New York. And that was one of my earliest experiences as well, going to that space. And I remember that it definitely, because of the fact that it was such a communal vibe, the fact that they, had this you walk in the door and there's no like reception desk. It's like you walk in the door and there's the table. And it's a big table
Yeah,
and
I'll never
it's
forget walking
basically
into that space.
yeah, yeah, and it's just such a rad group of people. Um, do you? I'm wondering, as you talk now about how things have changed since those kind of very early days. Um, if you're a person now who is maybe in the position you were in, many years ago when you were dealing with conference call issues, how would someone like you, what would they find now? Like let's say that you were that person, but you're that person today. So you've
Yeah,
never started a space before. You were just that person with the need. What What do you think is different about what they're finding now, and
yeah.
what does that mean in terms of space operators and how they have to change up how they approach things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's incredible how much it's changed. And I know you know this firsthand. I mean, I remember there being like a couple hundred spaces when we got started, and now there's something like, 14,000 or whatever that'll be launched by the end of this year. So, and I think we're in a really interesting time. I think the one thing that, I'd like to say that I think is really important, and it's also kind of the premise behind DeskPass, and that is that when I go to the street and I'm in this like insular techie co-working world. So like for a long time, I just assumed like, oh yeah, everyone knows what co-working is. I mean, I have a little Google News alert that went from like a few search terms a day to like hundreds and hundreds. And I just assume that everybody knows what co-working is. But what I find is that most people, the vast majority of people that I meet, still have no freaking idea that these types of spaces exist or that co-working is an option, period. So I'm very optimistic and bullish on the future of these types of spaces and that there's a lot more people who are yet to come. With that being said, the landscape of co-working is so much different than it was when we started. I mean, first of all, there are so many more spaces. And there are much more sophisticated operators. Um, so, more competition, you end up getting kind of a wider range of prices, you end up getting lower prices. So there's a lot more options and you can find them for cheaper. And then, there's a really big disparity in terms of like the type of experience and quality you're going to get. So, like I'm very Chicago centric, but like I'll try to use examples that are public. But you have like Serendipity Labs and Grind and WeWork and Level Office, and all these guys are taking this business very, very, very seriously, and they're doing a great job. And though the types of experience you can get within the different types of spaces, one might be better for this type of worker versus my type of work style, you're going to get a high level of quality within that space. Um, and I think that's a big change because I think, uh, there are probably 50 or 60 co-working spaces here in Chicago. And you're going to see a really diverse quality. You're going to see everything from like, I walk in, shiny receptionist, free coffee, beer, you name it, to spaces that are like much more indie cafe that are, there's not going to necessarily be someone in the front door when you walk there, that it's much more of a communal family environment. And I don't think one's particularly better than the other. I think, it really depends on what you're looking for, what makes you happy, what makes you work well, what's closest to your house or closest to kind of where you need to be. So it's a totally different landscape. There are way, way, way more spaces, and I think as an operator, it's harder. It's more competitive. Um, there are more like niche-driven spaces. So you have spaces that are focused on social impact or technology or a certain industry. Versus before, I think most of the spaces were just more generic, one size fits all. We can give you access to space that is shorter than a long-term commitment and lease from a traditional landlord here. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, totally. And now you're you're drumming up more for me, and one is really around. Now I'm picturing that I'm the operator, and I'm trying to track someone like you were, the guy who needs to be able to take a conference call without getting cut off and things like that, but maybe really does want also to have more than just a place to take a call, but really to be a part of something. So that's like a pretty common use case. And I also know that there are a lot of people on the sidelines, people who aren't members of co-working spaces who could be members of co-working spaces, but just haven't been given the right reason to join yet. And so I'm wondering, maybe Deskpass is going to catch some of those people and get them to say, well, I don't want to spend $300, $400, $500, $600 a month on a standard co-working membership, but I can take a crack at this Deskpass thing and maybe try out some spaces, see how it goes. I'm picturing, so that's like the theory. Now I'm one of those spaces. Let's say I manage one of those spaces. Now there is this kind of funny thing where you would love to see someone join a co-working space because they found it through Deskpass, but you obviously want to continue to grow your own membership as well. But I guess what I'm wondering is, as you talk to the space owners, what do they? What would you do if you were in their position to try to catch a member and really get them to want to stick around?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's hard to fake it. You just have to provide a great experience and be hospitable and care. And that's what's going to make you successful at running a co-working space, period. I think there are so many things that are sort of out of your control, right? I mean, how far is this from this person's house? What kind of environment do they need? Do they have the types of space that works for them? Is the pricing right? I mean, like, you can only control so much, but what you can control is when they walk in your four doors, you kill them with charm and you make them happy and you provide a great experience. So I find that the best spaces just do the best job at that, and then also do a great job at following up and saying, hey, Tony, I noticed you were at the Coop yesterday. I want to make sure you had a freaking awesome time. I also want you to know that if this is the type of space that like you're looking for in the long term, that we will offer you a great deal to become a full-time member of ours. That seems to be the formula that works really great for Deskpass members. But I think, again, like, our bread and butter customer right now is someone who works from home and they like working from home. And they're really just using Deskpass as a tool to get out of the house once a week or twice a week and explore and try something new. And even if that person isn't going to be the right full-time member for you, they might have a friend that's nearby or might know that your type of space is the type of space that, it would be useful in the future for them or somebody else. So I think, it's increasingly competitive and difficult for a co-working space, but at the end of the day, people don't go to these spaces, for the seats and the tables. I think they go there to be around other people and feel loved and welcomed and just have a good place to hang their hat. So, that's what I think everyone has to focus on providing to get our folks full time and to build a great space.
Great. So do you have you've run a space yourself for several years and now you work with other spaces. So I'm sure that you're just eyeball deep in this world. Do you have any great examples or stories or case studies of communities, your own or others, that have done something specific that has worked really well in this realm?
For our users or just in general? Oops, did I miss you? I'm gonna assume you said you mean this in general. Let me just make sure you can still hear me, Tony.
Can you ask the question again? Sorry, you cut out for like a minute.
No worries. No, in general or specific to Deskpass?
Oh, either like either your own experience running your space or other spaces that you've talked to, just like good little like case studies or stories of people who are just killing it in terms of like getting people to want to stick around and really care about a particular space as opposed to just kind of bopping around.
Yeah, I find that the most successful spaces that I come across are the ones with the best community managers and the folks that really take an active. I think that that role within a co-working community is the glue. And in my own experience, and having probably 4 or 5 different managers at the Coop, and fortunately most of them being fabulous. I find that the difference between someone who's really engaged and excited versus someone who is sort of passive or is like purely administrative is night and day. So to me, it's, taking the time to get to know that person, why they're coming, what they do, what they're looking for, and actively playing a role within the community to be a matchmaker. So like, hey Sam, you should meet Tony because of XYZ, or just in a nice, not over solicity or aggressive way, just being that sort of matchmaker that helps saying, hey, I think you two should meet and chat and have a coffee or something like that. So that I think is really good. And in general, anytime you open up the forum and the space to share what people are working on, what is making people tick, what they do. So for us, and these are very basic, but they work so well for us. It was lunch and learns and just getting someone to come in and talk about something special to them that they know a lot about, be it microfinance or tech investing or whatever it might be. Lunch and learn, and then show and tells. I think like everyone wants to share what they're doing and make connections and build relationships. Most people don't feel comfortable in an environment that's like a networking event or like a highly solicity type of event. So any way you can create forums that allow people to share what they do and what they're up to, what they care about, and just give folks the sort of vehicle and network within the space to be able to make those connections directly, I think you'll be the most successful. But the most successful spaces I've come across are the ones that, have the most vibrant, interconnected, and community of folks that are just like excited to work around each other and help each other and, share space.
It seems like an underrated feature that maybe people too easily overlook in favor of maybe making things a little bit more complicated for themselves. But it seems like a great community is really built one relationship at a time. And ultimately, that's, each person that walks in the door just really caring about them, getting to know them, figuring out what kind of a connection you can make that's valuable to them based on where they're at, and where they're trying to go. And it just seems like if you can kind of zero in on what is that thing that somebody needs right now, whether it's to be left alone or introduced to someone or they need to find someone to hire or whatever it is, just kind of, getting to know them well enough to figure out what that means for them right now, and then giving them some sense that, hey, this is a community where we can help you make that next step. It can, one really good moment like that can really make a lifetime fan out of a person who, maybe had just walked in the door not that long ago. And it seems like if you do that enough, then the word kind of gets out and people start to get the hang of this idea that, yeah, this is a place where special things happen.
And you could smell it, like I've probably been to, I don't know, 500 plus co-working spaces in my life. And like, it's not the furniture, it's not the design, it's not what floor it's on. It's like when you walk in the front door, you can feel it. You can feel a community of people who are connected and like working together versus, a space that has a bunch of desks that our people are sharing. And so some of it is I just like, yeah, I think it's getting the right people in the right place and being authentic and genuine and not trying to like, everyone's different. Everyone's looking for different things and playing that appropriately.
I wish I could go back and uh, take another chance at all the tours that I gave where I really just kind of showed them the facilities and, didn't take the time to really get to know the folks better. I found that when I did a lot better, it was when, someone came in thinking they were going to have a tour, and I basically just sat down and had a talk with them and just got to know them. And, hey, what do what brings you to co-working? What are you working on? What are you looking to do next? And then have a really great conversation to the point where, by the end of it, we say, well, oh yeah, let's show you around the space too, just while you're here. But it's almost kind of an afterthought because we were too busy having an awesome conversation. Um,
Yeah, man. It's funny you say that. I had one of my buddies is a commercial real estate, actually a residential and commercial broker, but he shows condos and apartments, and he said he's changed his strategy from, here's the space, there's two bathrooms and four bedrooms and blah blah blah, to sitting those people down and ask them how they found you, what they're looking for, why they're moving, just to really understand where they're coming from, before even showing the space and the features. And most people, especially in this like highly transactional world, are just not freaking used to that. And that could be enough to just, oh wait, you really give a shit. You really care about who I am and why I'm here and what I'm looking for. And that sort of shift is something that you're probably not going to get, looking for at a cafe or a more traditional year-long lease. I mean, that's something that's really unique and special to co-working.
and not altogether that complicated. I mean, if I'm listening to this and I'm a community manager or a manager of a space, it's really a matter of a shift in mindset of simply how you approach that conversation. You're not necessarily creating some radical new marketing technique. You're really just saying, I'm going to try to practice not selling my space, but getting to know this person, building a relationship, and then letting the value kind of naturally emerge from there. And I'm sure you've done this many times where, in the course of getting to know somebody, inevitably there ends up being some kind of moment when somebody says, "Yeah, actually, what I really could use is someone to help me make a new logo for this thing," and you think, "Well, hey, wait a minute, that guy over there does that."
Yeah, yeah.
And those kinds of moments are just magical.
To me, the most magical moment, and I really like, are even are that, but then when you like extract, like kind of abstract at another level, I always thought there's such cool value in co-working where it's like, I remember one of the first people that we had in our space was a professor of microeconomics, like micro lending, and I had no idea what that was. And I remember him telling me about that, and like those are the types of ideas and things that really excite me because, if I work in the same office every day with the same people doing the same thing, I'm going to come across the same ideas from the same people. But if I work in a community environment where there's all sorts of people, designers and inventors and salespeople and lawyers, and and I can hear them in the background talking about some idea or some concept or some tool that just like I would have never come across because it's just not in my direct path. And then I think like, oh, that's a cool idea. How can I apply that to my idea or my concept or what I'm working on? Or how can that inspire how I think? Like that has always been the part of co-working and sharing that I get the most joy out of. I love a good, like, I'm a writer, I need writing, handshake, great, let's do this. That's freaking amazing. But it's like, if I can hear in the background a new, you know, book or a new way of thinking that like can really influence me, like that's the stuff that really gets me excited. And I think that's one of the kind of coolest uh, byproducts of what we do.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I think those are the moments that I feel like you go home feeling like you did your job that day when you have just one story like that. Uh,
Yeah.
those are the days I feel like I feel good about what we're doing because you can really see the connections getting made and the good that you're doing to help these people find each other and do cool stuff with each other. And the diversity is such a wonderful part of it. And obviously there's like certain specific niche spaces where there are a lot of advantages to that as well. But diversity is so great. And you mentioned the show and tell was another thing I wanted to come back to. I wonder if you have a good story of something that you discovered that a member was working on that you had no idea they were doing until the show and tell. And while you think of that, I'll tell you a quick story of one of mine. which was a member
Sure.
who created their own font, and it was based. It was I don't remember exactly what this was, but I think it was based on the lettering that they used on buildings in a certain neighborhood in like a German town or something. That it was like this very like elaborate, ornate story background, and the font itself was gorgeous. And this was a guy where I don't think that was even what he did for a living, but this was like a side project. And he show and telled how he made the font, how
That's
he went
cool.
into, and we were just like our jaws were on the floor. It was incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think just like opening up the forum and letting people share what they do in a way like that is really important because I know like when that doesn't happen, I'll sit in a room and I'll be like, what do all these people do? So I always got like really excited to be able to see like, oh, like that's what you do all day. You're working on this stuff. We had a guy who used to work at our space who actually moved to New York who is a product designer, an industrial designer. And he had like this crazy big rig and he was there at all hours and he was like a lovely, awesome dude and just like very into what he did and it was like a very intense period of working for his life. And I remember him showing us some of like it was all medical products that he was working on. And that was really cool. And actually, now that I think of it, the best one was we had a guy who used to rent our space and work out of the coop who was a motion graphics designer, and he was working on the title sequence for it was not the latest, it was two James Bond movies ago. So he was actually compositing the title sequence for James Bond in the coop. And I was like, what? I had no idea. It's pretty cool.
That is so, so cool. Some of those James Bond opening sequences are my favorite parts of what are sometimes not very good films. So that is great.
Yeah.
Oh man, and to think now I can think. Oh man, that title sequence that a guy worked on that in a co-working space. Wow.
I helped. We helped.
Yeah.
Where's our
Amazing.
credit?
All right, so Sam, tell me a little bit about Juicy. You're going to be joining us in New York for Juicy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing there and what you're excited about?
Yeah, I think this is like my fifth Juicy. It's been doing it for a while, and I really enjoy it. My favorite experiences are always just seeing great people who are doing the same thing. I tend to like really enjoy the moments that aren't like in, in the conference or the unconference, but like during breaks where you can just talk to people, catch up, learn about what they're doing. I love the people who go to that, and I've made some of my dearest friends through Juicy and through this community. So the things, going back to New York, which I freaking love, launching Deskpass in New York, which is so exciting for us. So we'll be there with our team. We're a sponsor, and we want to meet lots of spaces in New York, and we're really excited to be there. But I really, I really find value. One of the things that has always inspired me the most about this community and industry is people's willingness to share. Um, we're helping sponsor the tours this year, so we have a ton of spaces all over New York that you'll be able to go check out, and we're building a little guide that allows you to see which spaces are where and make sure they expect you. And it's like these people are willingly letting in folks that are essentially competitors, right? I mean, they're thinking or trying or operating spaces, maybe not in New York City, but maybe. And still, we're all willing to let people in the front door and share our stories. And I remember hearing this like concept a long time ago, and I really believe it, especially in what we do, which is, you know, worry about making the pie bigger. Don't worry about making your slice bigger. If you can make the pie bigger, your slice is going to get bigger, and so will everyone else's. And I think that's something that Juicy really embodies, and co-working really embodies, which is, there's a big opportunity in front of us. There's lots of people who still don't know that this exists. So let's focus on sharing our resources and our expertise and our lessons learned, and let's rise to the tide and make everybody's piece a little bigger.
That was great. I just one last quick question. if I'm going to Juicy for the first time, what would be a quick tip that you give me to get the most out of the experience, really get my money's worth?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy conference. So like it's not like I've been to a few conferences that are scary and big and complicated, and I think things are pretty simple and easy. So, make a friend. Find someone cool, come say hi to me, and make a friend. Ideally someone who's done this before can help you navigate. But it's really like the friendliest of conferences that I know. So don't be scared. That's my advice to you, and meet someone cool and help them and hang out with them.
Fabulous. Sam, thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm excited to see you in New York in just a few weeks.
Holy moly. See you soon. Yeah, man. I'm excited too.
And that does it for this episode of Juicy Radio. Thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us, and I really hope to see all of you in New York, May 5th through 7th for Juicy USA. That's head to usa.gcuc.co for information on tickets. And if you have any other thoughts you'd like to share with me, hit me up at tony@nwc.co. Again, that's tony@nwc.co, or Tony Be Good on Twitter. Until next time, keep being awesome.